Seen any good movies lately? Now, chances are if I had asked you that question 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, you might have answered yes. Where'd you see it? The Camp Horn Drive-In, maybe? The Wexford Starlight? How about the Blue Dell? Or one of the many other outdoor drive-in theaters that used to dot the Pittsburgh landscape? Maybe you went with your parents in their station wagon, or maybe you went with a date. When you got there, you rolled down the window, clipped a metal speaker onto it, and waited for it to get dark. Then the screen lit up with some previews, a commercial for the concession stand, and finally, the feature. Shawn Israel works at one of the very few remaining drive-ins in the Pittsburgh area. It's the Riverside Drive-In in Vandergrift. Today on BurghCast, he talks about drive-in culture, drive-in food, who watches movies outside today anyway, and much more. You are probably, in fact you probably know more about drive-in theaters in this area than anybody that I think I've ever met.
I cannot make that claim. I think there's a few who can better me on that, and one person that comes to mind is actually historian Brian Butko.
Oh, Brian, yeah.
Yeah, who's written numerous books about Pittsburgh lore and history, and he's very, very studied in that as well. Also historian Jennifer Sopko, I have to credit with a lot of knowledge about drive-in theaters and having done a lot of research. And one of my good friends that I have seen on the drive-in circuit by the name of Denny Pine is quite a collector of drive-in lore, drive-in ads, and his knowledge is quite extensive. Even retired arts writer Ed Blank, who used to work for the Pittsburgh Press and the Trib, he has an extraordinary memory for not only the drive-ins but the theaters in the Pittsburgh area too. So I am just but one of the folks who have compiled info on this stuff.
So you work at the Riverside Drive-In in Vandergrift. How did you get involved with that, and how long have you been there?
Well, this will be my, correct me if I'm right, 12th summer with the Riverside Drive-In Theater, and it's technically in North Vandergrift, PA, so it's on the Armstrong County side, but very close to Westmoreland, but about halfway between Vandergrift and Leechburg. I got involved with that place because, number one, friends of mine came into ownership of it in 2005, and I found myself in a circumstance beginning in 2008 where I was actually living next to, or near the drive-in, just about 3 miles away, and I was looking for some local work, and I've always been, as we'll certainly establish, been passionate about drive-in theaters. And I asked them, hey, could you use an extra hand? And their response was, yeah, sure. And, well, the rest is history, needless to say. And what I do there when I'm off from my regular job, which is assistant house manager at Pittsburgh Public Theater, the O'Reilly downtown, when I'm on my summer break from there, I will make popcorn, take tickets. If you ever call the drive-in information line, that'll be my mellifluous tones on the outgoing message telling you what the attractions are and how much it costs. So I've been involved with the drive-in for it'll be my 12th summer, and the drive-in itself is the only one I know of, not just here in Western Pennsylvania, but anywhere, that has existed under 3 different ownerships and 3 different names.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it started out, it opened in May of 1949 as Lee's Woodland Drive-In, and it was the Woodland until it closed in the early 80s. It was dormant for about almost 12, 13 years. Then it was reopened as the Galaxy Drive-In in 1995, and then the current owners made it the Riverside Drive-In in 2005, and it is actually by a river, the Kiskiminitis. So it's there's truth in advertising on that.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
I don't have to ask you about the name now.
Yep, there you are.
So at one time, and certainly growing up in Pittsburgh, there were lots and lots of drive-in theaters here, because when you're little, your parents take you there, and now we're down to just a handful in the area. So what made the Riverside last this long?
Well, I think it was that what really helped is that the original skeleton or the framework of the property didn't get bulldozed. It still had, even though a good portion of the screen had to be, well, the screen did have to be replaced, the essential like ticket booth setup and the building were still there. It was still set up to be a drive-in theater. And then when folks were, scouting around for the location, they kind of had that, advantage so that they didn't have to build it from scratch. And so it became, I'm sure, perhaps marginally easier. I mean, if a place is going to sit for, 13 years, there's going to be some issues you have to take care of in terms of plumbing, wiring, construction, a host of things, making sure everything's up to code. But if you have the framework there, that's I imagine that's kind of an advantage for you. So that would be why that. So by a stroke of luck, I guess, that the drive-in never got completely bulldozed. That it was still, and you had people who were interested in running theaters. Both the fellow who opened up the Galaxy, Jim LaPuma, and the folks who now own and run the Riverside, Todd Ammon and Emma Ross, they were both working in the trade, and all of them were working in the trade. They had worked at theaters and drive-ins, and they had a passion for running movie theaters and keeping the drive-ins going. And I think my estimation is one of the key factors in that is probably the closing of the Greater Pittsburgh Drive-In in 1997, which is one of the biggest operations we had. It was run by the Warren family, and it got up to 5 screens from gradually expanding screens from the time it opened in 1954, right on 30 in North Versailles, to 1997 when it closed. And it was an amazing place. It was a wonderland for drive-in enthusiasts. 5 screens plus mini golf, and it was just an amazing operation.
I do remember from my childhood that there were drive-ins that combined not only the screen but also carnival rides, things like that.
Sure.
Because in those days, going to drive-ins, especially families, was commonplace. Does the Riverside do first-run movies now?
Yes, the Riverside does run first-run movies. Most drive-ins that are still operating do, and that's because first-run movies are available, so they're obviously going to take advantage of it. And what's kind of cool in this day and age is that a lot of features that are geared for family audiences get specifically released in the summer when you have school out and families are able to go to movies en masse. And even though the drive-ins don't compose a huge percentage of all the venues available to the movie-going public, they're able to benefit from that if they can pay the percentage that whatever the movie studio dictates and run it with a second feature. And so, for example, movies have a tendency to open wide. So a recent example, Toy Story 4 opens everywhere. Perfect movie for taking the family to the drive-in. A lot of the drive-ins jump on that. Turns out to be available, and so that's the movie that all the venues will show. Now, for drive-ins with multiple screens, they'll also take advantage of other attractions that are out there. But generally, it's a first-run feature that probably has a little bit of heat on it, so or fairly new and looks like it'll appeal to a family audience.
So you're saying that it's mainly families that you see at the Riverside, right?
Yeah, I would say that's true for the most part. Definitely in the summer months between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and even a little bit of a ramp up to Memorial Day, because remember, usually a major action movie comes out first weekend of May, like the Avengers movie normally does, or if there's a Fast and Furious movie, that'll open up to kind of, get us anticipatory for the other summer attractions. It's kind of a nice...
Do drive-ins, and specifically the one that you are at, do they still show trailers or pre-features or things like that?
Ours does, and I know that quite a few other drive-ins do as well. But yeah, we have a selection of trailers that were originally produced by the Filmax studio in Evanston, Illinois. And they're the classic drive-in trailers you remember, with dancing hot dogs and biodegrading pizzas before your eyes.
Wow.
And sparkling. And as a matter of fact, there's even a service that can do basically a restored digital version of the original 35 as well, or taken from the print as well. I know we're not the only drive-in that does that, but we definitely show it, and it adds a little bit of fun to the evening. Certainly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have good memories of your youth going to drive-ins, or was that not something that was part of your childhood?
That was definitely part of my childhood.
Yeah.
The drive-in I work at in particular was one of several that my parents took me to when I was a child, and I have a distinct memory of being about 5 years old, and I remember I was at that particular drive-in back when it was the Woodland, and it seemed to me that the whole town was there. It was just a lot full of cars. My parents and I were in the car. We had the family dog with us. And I remember in the car next door, my aunt and uncle were sitting there, and I would just remember this kind of morass of people. And I distinctly remember the movie showing was, and this would certainly explain why there were a lot of cars, because I'm fairly sure if it was the summer of 1968, then they were probably showing The Graduate.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the movie, the hit movie that year. You know, it was a huge sensation. So, and it seemed like the whole town showed up that night to see the movie, and that's one of the early memories. I also have earlier kind of fragmented memories of, believe it or not, Dr. Zhivago at the drive-in. Just remember kind of an image of as Yuri Zhivago, Omar Sharif, and I remember being in the car seeing that, but I don't have a sustained memory of it, but it's conceivable. Where I grew up in Leechburg, we had access probably to at least 4 drive-in theaters, maybe 5, that were in a half hour's distance of us. So we had a lot of options, and that was certainly the case for the Pittsburgh area. I think they reached their zenith in about 1960 as far as drive-in saturation, and then there were a couple of more sites that opened, but basically beginning, I guess, in the 70s and definitely into the late 80s, there was a real downturn where more and more sites started to close. So
is that because of the availability on TV, online, HBO, pay channels?
That was part of it.
Yeah,
that was definitely part of it. There was stuff you could see that would entice people to want to stay home, if not first-run features, fairly current stuff. Also, real estate began to rise in value quite a bit, and so some people who might have opened their drive-in theaters in the 40s or the 50s were looking forward to retiring. They could get a lot for their land for selling the drive-in, and so you saw the kind of waves in the 80s and early 90s of drive-ins, finally going on the block and becoming something else because the owners just decided to retire and give it up.
Do you think it'll ever make a comeback, as far as even for nostalgia's sake?
Well, not a full-scale comeback, probably not, just because of the price of the land, or the value of the land, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And Pittsburgh was a unique case because it's my understanding that we got so many drive-ins, or ozoners, as they're also known, because some of the coal fields that went into disuse after they shut down, I guess the composition, the layout proved easily convertible to a drive-in field. And so we were fortunate in that, and Pittsburgh had so many sites for a market of our size that we were known as the unofficial drive-in capital of the world,
right?
Because of the density of the population density of the drive-ins. They were everywhere.
Wow, that's interesting. And wasn't the first movie theater, was it in Newcastle or Warner Brothers?
Warner Brothers were in Newcastle. The Warner Brothers were in Newcastle. I forget where the exact location. Saw the Nickelodeon, and then they were kind of inspired. Originally, I think they were in the clothing business, and they decided to get into the movie business very wisely. So, in Pittsburgh, the first actual drive-in theater, I can even give you the date on this one. I have my cheat sheet with me, but yes, August 27th, 1940 is what my research turned up, and what would become the South Park Drive-In Theater. But originally, it was just called Drive-In Theater, and it changed its name to South Park a few years later. And it was the only drive-in to open in Pittsburgh prior to American involvement in World War II. Once the war ended, and of course the boom that happened subsequent to that, when a lot of soldiers and sailors, a lot of the military folk returned home, wanted to start settling down, and we got the rise of the suburbs. That's when the drive-in boom really, really began in Pittsburgh. Right around 1946 and 47, probably for about more than a decade, any given year, there were like 10 new drive-ins that would open somewhere in southwestern Pennsylvania alone. And it was, certainly what was happening across the country as well, because that was the thing. It caught on. It caught on big time.
Now, I have two questions for you that might veer a little bit, not really technical, but just from a standpoint of media.
Sure.
How is media supplied to drive-ins today as far as the films and so forth? Are they DVDs or are they downloadable? How do you get your films?
Generally, the media, most drive-ins had to go the way of most hardtop theaters and go digital. It was kind of a necessity because that's the direction the industry was going in. But there are a few ozoners, and none come to mind immediately, that still run film. I know there's at least one in Pennsylvania, I think out in eastern Pennsylvania, that does. Not sure which one it is, but most run digital because that's just the way of things now. And generally, digital movies are delivered to drive-ins kind of as a kind of hard drive that you load into your projection systems, and there's a whole security system, so you can't show the movie before it's time, But basically, it's all digitally provided. I mean, there's still a physical drive that you get to load, but it's loaded into the projection system, and generally the sound systems are much improved. And most of the sound at the drive-in, as far as media is concerned, of course, we used to have the in-car speakers, which, and they formed a whole kind of running joke about don't drive off of the speaker, and how tough they were to maintain. And those have generally been phased out in favor of radio sound.
It's still tuning in your radio to get the sound?
Still tuning in your radio to get the sound, and the sound is pretty good.
Really?
Actually, yeah. You just have to remember, if you're listening on a radio, put your car in the accessory position so you don't drain the battery, or bring your own, portable radio, or some drive-ins, ours does, and I know others do too, you can rent a radio for a couple of bucks. Yeah.
I did not know you offered that service. Wow.
Yep.
Does the concession stand at a drive-in do a lot of business these days?
Well, we certainly hope so. That's how a drive-in stays solvent, basically. And that's really where the brunt of the income comes for a successful drive-in theater, because to show a film, there's usually a rental fee. To show a first-run film, you could be talking like 80% of whatever the take is at the box office in the first week. It will. Now, if you hold on to it for a while, that percentage will diminish, but that's still a pretty healthy bite of whatever you're taking in. So the real profit, as it were, or what's able to go back into the business and keep the drive-in going, is made through the concession stand. What you sell in terms of snacks, what you sell in terms of food. And concession stands and drive-ins, that's really, I always like to think of as the personality of the drive-in theater, because it varies from site to site, and you get a real sense, I think, of just kind of the personality of what you can expect, or what you can. It just sets the tone. Let's put it that way for kind of the social hub of the drive-in. And the typical drive-in food, you've got hot grills, so you're able to have burgers and dogs. Nachos are popular. Popcorn, of course, is a staple. Candy is, of course, a staple. Ice cream, certainly in the summertime. Various beverages. Some drive-ins do snow cones. Some drive-ins do funnel cakes. Some drive-ins will do. I've been at other sites where they do like breaded mini hot dogs, which is kind of cool. There's a drive-in out east, Harris and Dillsburg, and I don't know if they still do this. They made their own milkshakes on site. And there are other drive-ins that have served seafood sandwiches. It can get pretty distinctive depending on where you are, and I'm sure local popularity and regional popularity has something to do with the cuisine, certainly what's available through distributors, how popular an item is. But each and every drive-in kind of has its own personality in that snack bar, depending on what's available.
So do you ever go to the drive-in when you're not working at the drive-in? As a patron?
I would love to go to the drive-in as a patron. Now, I actually have hung out at the drive-in I work at because it's so convenient, and said, "Hey, can I actually sit and watch the movie tonight? I'm not on the schedule." Usually, it's like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." And I still love to go when I happen to be free, just to see what the other folks are doing. I've always loved the experience, and I'll even tell you, I credit the drive-in with me becoming a movie buff. My big moment happened when I was 11 years old, and there was a drive-in out in Ford City, just outside of Ford City, PA, in Armstrong County, called the Super 66. And my dad happened to see a movie ad that mentioned that they were showing a couple of Marx Brothers films, a couple of classic Marx Brothers comedies.
Yeah.
And those were very big things back then. They were big with college students, and there was a big Marx Brothers revival kind of going on. So their old films were making the circuit. And so we went and saw, I remember my dad, a friend, and I loaded up the car, and we went and saw Horse Feathers and Duck Soup.
Oh, my.
Two of their classics from the early 30s, right. And I remember during the intermission between, I got up to go to the restroom and check out the snack bar, and as I was walking across the field to the hub there, I saw one of the Filmac intermission reels with kind of, amusing scenarios involving food, and, how about a pizza? None better anywhere. The pizza's like disappearing magically. And I also happened to glance inside the projection booth, and it was a very intense atmosphere there. It was like red light and just these huge reels of film just running through sprockets. And it was at that point I got the revelation in my way, because I was still quite young at the time, that there was a conscious effort behind this, that there was a kind of craft behind this. And from that night, I would say I became a diehard movie fan. I started reading movie ads in the paper on a regular basis, on a daily basis, both the local paper and the Pittsburgh papers, and that's when I kind of became familiar with the landscape at the time. And I started reading about film history and movie lore, and kind of seeking out movies on TV that I thought looked and sounded interesting to me. And the next thing you know, I was watching foreign films on, so it just one thing spurred another, and classic comedies and everything else.
Well, that's something that I was going to get to.
That was the inciting incident.
Is that right? Now, yeah. I've known you. We've known each other for many years, and
right.
As long as I've known you, you've been not only a movie buff, but somebody who's very, very knowledgeable about the film industry and about movies. You have a real appreciation for movies from all era.
Right.
And, maybe that's been lost a little bit today, because things today are so explosions, superheroes, those kinds of things. And, some things get lost sometimes.
Some things get lost, but what's really good maybe about digital preservation is there is a lot that has been saved and archived. And so as far as, the cinephilia, we'll call it, there's a rich treasure trove of material to research and scan from and look up. I mean, go to a public library. Just about any public library with a video collection, a DVD collection, will probably have some gems crossing eras and kind of crossing cultures that you can get into. So if anybody who's interested in exploring film, that is readily available. And of course, we're talking about online. There are numerous sites where you can download movies that might be of interest to you that aren't necessarily that somehow fell through the cracks somehow. So I really appreciate with all the modern media and digital that we have, is that so much of it is so accessible to us. And then of course you have classic channels like Turner Classic and what have you that certainly help, and other cable channels that. But there's so many ways to absorb it. The trick, I guess, is getting that appreciation. Getting the appreciation first of all. One of the things, the other situation that I wanted to bring up was that when I went to college, I took a lot of film classes. That was just an overriding interest of mine, and I incorporated it into my major. And I started studying, as I say, films from other eras, films from other cultures, and kind of breaking them down to see how, where they came from, what were the circumstances that brought about their production. So I'm studying French New Wave, Italian neo-realism, classic screwball comedy of the 30s, musicals, Japanese cinema, Italian cinema, British cinema, and I started to, make connections and kind of have more clarity into why the films that appealed to me. It's like it all fit together, would be the best way to describe it, through documentaries as well and other non-narrative forms of film. So I like to think of myself as a guy who just loves movies. That seems to just make sense to me.
Well, and I think what a lot of people don't realize, because the blockbusters that come out, the tentpole movies that Hollywood releases,
right.
They tend to get a lot of publicity, get a lot of attention in the media.
Sure.
And everybody knows that a new Spider-Man movie is coming out,
yep.
the new Lion King, things like that. But some of the most engaging movies are the sleepers, the ones that
right.
don't get a lot of publicity and you almost discover on your own. I've discovered, I can't tell you how many just really low-key movies that I've absolutely loved,
right.
because I happen to take a chance on them.
And that's really, you kind of have to be open enough to kind of keep a compartment for that as well. And sometimes you can really get rewarded through the tentpole movies as well.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot of quality in those too. So not to disparage, one group over another.
Oh no.
And I'm always a sucker for example, the Pixar movies.
Oh yeah, I love Pixar. Yeah.
Love the Pixar movies, and I really enjoyed it. I haven't seen the new Spider-Man. I loved the last Spider-Man. So I'm kind of chomping at the bit to see the next one.
Oh yeah.
The point is, I guess, that you never know where something's going to come from to hit you in a certain way or to affect you in a certain way. There's so much product out there. I see that with television as well. Our renaissance with television that probably started with HBO back in the 90s and then extended to sites like Netflix and Hulu and what have you. There is so much interesting work out there that I would say it's in a way easier than ever, just in terms of basic access, for somebody to have a good sampling of things and become a real cinephile, even if you're watching TV, even if you're looking at it on your phone, although that's not my favorite way, or even if you're sitting under the stars in a field, watching it with other people sitting under the stars in a field, which just happens to be my favorite. It always has.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of ways to get enlightenment. There's a lot of ways to derive the pleasure from that experience. So.
Do today's movies that are made with high definition and with zillions of colors, do they look as good on a drive-in screen as they do on an indoor screen or on a large screen television?
I think they do, and the reason is the projection.
Okay.
I think so. That's my humble opinion, not coming from a technical background, but with digital projection, you really do get sharp images. That now certainly in a drive-in situation, you're still subject to environmental factors like rain, like fog, but as a rule, I mean, they're clear and sharp.
What are you projecting on? What's the screen made out of at a drive-in?
I'm trying to think. Probably, I'm going to say I don't know. I will tell you that the standard, because it may be an alloy or something like that, there have been wooden screens, there have been brick tower screens. Aluminum is really popular as far as a screen. And generally, they're treated... kind of washed with white paint or treated every so often like that, so that the image can reflect more, can be a little brighter when you show it. So yeah, but any decent projection system, almost no matter what you're showing, is going to be clear and sharp.
When you're at the drive-in and beyond the families who come to see the shows, Do you ever run into people who are drive-in buffs, people that come to the drive-in
Oh,
because
yes.
they love going to drive-ins?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Especially we have a couple of film festivals that we happen to show at our particular drive-in called the Drive-In Super Monsterama.
Oh, yeah.
And those are twice a year monster movie festivals, usually having some kind of a theme. Like, here it's a Dracula weekend, or here are films from the 70s, or, some kind of theme, or here's Christopher Lee, whatever. People who are horror movie fans certainly come out, but people who are just movie fans who have, had it on their bucket list that, no, I want to see, Night of the Living Dead on a drive-in screen, or I want to see, this movie on a drive-in screen, or I want to see Peter Cushing on a drive-in screen. You get that a lot, too. There's a lot of movie love to go around. A lot of movie love to go around. One of my personal goals, I've never seen it, and several drive-in theaters I know of do retro nights, including ours, where you can show older movies sometimes, depending on XYZ factors. I still have never seen one of the movies that I think would be awesome on a drive-in screen. I've just never seen it on a drive-in screen, and that's American Graffiti.
Oh,
I would
God.
love to see American. Now, I've seen it on the big screen
Yep.
in a movie theater, but I just want to see it at a drive-in.
Yep.
That would be awesome.
And Shawn, can I tell you that? And I love movies and have all my life.
Yeah.
My favorite movie of all time.
Really?
It is. Yeah.
Wow.
I saw that when I was in high school.
Sure.
A couple times at the theater, at the movie theaters, and then they re-released it. I saw it again. It was the first VHS tape I bought.
Wow.
And the first DVD I bought.
Wow. Okay.
No, I totally
I sense a
agree with
theme here, John.
I love that movie, and it spoke to me when I saw it. Because I was in high school at the time.
Sure.
And Pittsburgh is not Modesto, California, but
Right.
we were living similar lives at that point in our life. you know.
Right. And to see the kind of imagery and the kind of visual style that, and credit where it's due, George Lucas put forth with his crew, I think in an interview he said he wanted it to resemble a jukebox, and that's a great visual metaphor for what that movie is. And it's a lot of interesting stories, and I love narratives about multiple characters. I'm a sucker for that, and there's lots of cruising and lots of motion and lots of music. And I guess the soundtrack was actually the songs were re-recorded in a gym to get the
I didn't know
echo
that.
sound to it. Is what I heard. Again, not verified, but that's what I heard. And the whole experience, the whole sensory experience of the movie and the whole enjoyment of the movie, I'm just thinking, I would love to see this outside under the stars sometimes. It's a movie about cruising. It's a natural.
It's awesome. I mean, we all did that. I mean, when I was that age, Lincoln Avenue in Bellevue was our cruising spot. I think we all had a cruising spot at that age, And just as a shout out to Mad Magazine, Mort Drucker designed the American Graffiti poster.
Yes.
Now, when you travel, when you go on vacation, visit other places, other cities, do you seek out drive-ins or check them out or anything?
I try to, yeah. I haven't been traveling for a while, but I've gone to eastern Pennsylvania and seen some very cool drive-ins out that way. I've driven through Ohio and visited some drive-ins. When I was in Las Vegas, the one time I was in Las Vegas, I sought out the drive-in there. I didn't get a chance to go, but I basically got a look at its location. They have I think at the time they had a 5 or a 6 screen drive-in out that way. And I've been to the Benji's Drive-In in Baltimore, Maryland. I think that's the only drive-in left in Maryland. Huge operation there. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Whenever I travel and I know there's a drive-in nearby, I'm probably going to go out of my way and at least take a look at it in the daytime.
And it's kind of interesting too. In recent years, just to connect this, there have been outdoor movie experiences. Of course, here in the city, we have them in the park in Pittsburgh.
Right.
But Austin has an outdoor theater, and New York is well known for its outdoor
Los
movies.
Angeles as well has like a movies in the park set up.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's why I think drive-ins will never necessarily vanish entirely. It's not just the novelty of it, which is, I think terrific in and of itself.
Yeah.
You can say you went to the drive-in, but also because I think, and again, I think I might have established this point earlier, that there is something very appealing about being outside in the summertime. Summertime is a special time because it's not going to last that long, and for just a very couple, at least I would think for most of the continental U.S., for just a couple of months out of the year, there's this time when you can go outside and stay outside and experience life just outside and get in contact with, whatever aspect of it, whether it's the nature, whether it's the freedom, whether it's the social opportunities, whether it's just looking up at the stars. It's kind of our version. And drive-in movies are kind of another way of looking up at the stars and seeing what you can see and seeing how they move and seeing where they go. And I think that there's just kind of a basic need for that entertainment that I think the drive-ins satisfy. Or like watching a campfire. Yeah. It's like a campfire tells a story, in the way it burns and, its progression and what have you. What food are you going to eat? How long is it going to last? How comfortable are you going to get?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the same principle.
And there's a basic simplicity to it that the era in which we grew up, we appreciate that because we knew going to the drive-in with our parents, or maybe when we got older going with our friends or our dates or whatnot. But because there's so many electronic devices now,
right,
a lot of people of a certain age today, they may not even get the simplicity and the charm and the nostalgia fact. Well, obviously not the nostalgia.
Not the nostalgia, but I like to think, and I do see a lot of family traffic. Thanks to family-oriented films, especially animated films. Animated films becoming popular again, back in the 90s to today. You have this, I perceived you've had this whole new kind of generation of young families who can bring their kids to something that's family-friendly and, as a rule, not too expensive and have a nice evening out. And it's not only accessible, but let's not forget the very basic appeal to it. Going to a drive-in is fun. Going to the drive-in is fun. You get to go outside, see a movie, eat food you wouldn't normally eat, sit in the car, just hang out, sit in lawn chairs in front of your car, even swatting mosquitoes.
And wearing pajamas.
It's a way to be, just very casual, not the usual rules. It's you can be more relaxed. It can be more of a good time. There's even room to run around in front of the screen a lot of times, or play a little catch or toss a frisbee around before the movie starts.
Well, if people listening to this, and we still have a lot of summer left at this point,
sure,
want to go to the Riverside Drive-In and see movies, you have a website?
Yeah, you bet we do, and I'm gonna look it up so I don't get because I do the phone message every single week, and now of course I can't remember the copy, but I go there all the time. Riverside Drive-In is basically between Leechburg and Vandergrift on Old Route 66. And
how far from Pittsburgh would you say?
About between 30 and 35 miles due northeast, I would say. And there are directions on the website, but our website is www.riversidedrivein.com, and you can also check us out on Facebook at Riverside DI. So there you go.
BurghCast is written and produced by me, John Fries, at Blue Mist Media. Comments, suggestions, and questions are always welcome at burghcast@gmail.com. Our website is at www.burghcast.com, and there's a BurghCast Facebook page. As always, thanks for listening.